When I arrived here, I was very mindful of the commitment and the dedication of people within the churches, both here at Ashburnham and at Penhurst. And I suppose one of the things which really struck us, which applies to all churches, is, ensuring that we're able to make ends meet, but also to do all the things that we want to do, which we believe God is calling us to do.
So having been rector of this parish for 26 years now, I guess I've seen quite a few diocesan initiatives on fundraising come and go, and there did seem to be a kind of sea change in the thinking with this whole image of the journey of generosity. It was something that really clicked with me.
When I arrived at St Margaret's Highfield in October 2020, it became apparent quite quickly that this congregation had not had that much teaching about generosity and giving for some time, and I felt that it was important that we tried to embed it and make it become part of our DNA. We live in a beautiful part of Crawley, and I felt that we could respond to God's generosity by reflecting that in all we did in and around this community and for this church.
We had a real issue with giving in that we felt it was a burden, and we were trying to give, we were trying to meet our parish share, but we were meeting it with dwindling reserves, and we could never seem to get on top of that. And so we just decided we needed to do something.
Before the pandemic struck, we were very much aware that our giving wasn't quite keeping pace with our outgoings. And we began to plan for doing some kind of stewardship campaign, as we then called it, before we started working with Andrew. But obviously, along came the pandemic, and that did make things, it slowed us down a bit. A year and a half ago, Andrew came to our PCC, and we had a very good PCC meeting, thinking about the whole business of how generosity is part of our discipleship and what it means to be a Christian, to give.
Each year in around November time we have a stewardship campaign. We encourage people to prayerfully consider their giving for the year ahead. And each year it's different, each year it's new, but it's not a new thing to the church family. The first stewardship campaign here was in 1960. When we launched one this year, an older member of the church family came to me and showed me this. This is our stewardship campaign from 1964 called The Second Mile. And in that you'll find an encouragement from the scriptures for Christians to be generous in their giving, a budget setting out the challenges and opportunities for the year ahead, including giving money away as well to overseas mission. But this is something that's been around in the church family for a long time, and we've inherited this great teaching of Christian stewardship, encouraging the church family to be generous.
One of the positive things that had been happening was that we were a growing congregation, and we'd attracted a number of new people who untapped potential. What might they be able to do to kind of contribute to the community? And I went to meet a couple who had fairly recently arrived and had joined the church. And I asked one of them whether he would be interested in becoming a stewardship officer, which is a role we have had in the past, but we didn't currently have. And also, me being half-time, I needed some support with this. I needed someone else to be able to take a lead on it. And he thought about it and said yes. And that has been a great gift to us, because it meant I could hand something over to someone who had, one, the enthusiasm, but also the expertise to be able to take us forward. So his help has been really good.
One thing we noticed was that treasurers in parishes often wanted to talk to someone else or other treasurers about things that they wanted to ask, about how they should fundraise, about how their church should give. And so we decided to try and get the treasurers together in a sort of a support network, just to air those questions, from very practical things to actually how do we change the culture of giving in our churches. I think one of the problems is that it can feel like changing giving is all on the vicar's shoulders. But actually, God can raise up people from our congregations to do amazing things. For us, our treasurer said, if we want to fund our vision, we need to change our giving. And that's where our team with wardens and other church members came from.
We have a very good treasurer, Sandy Duck, who has done an amazing job of getting our kind of finances not just in order, but in a state that we can understand where we're at, which is kind of really important. But it's not just Sandy. We have we call it the treasury team, and we meet before every PCC meeting, about a week beforehand, and we look through all the financial indicators and the accounts and where we're at, so that actually when we come to the PCC meeting, there's been some thought given to that, and we've got quite a range of people on that who bring different skills. In terms of the transformation project, as we call it here, we have another group of people looking after that as well. So again, we're very blessed with people, talented people, leave it to the vicar, not much gets done. If you have a team, you can do an awful lot more.
From a church leader's point of view, is making sure that the church is with you, not just the congregation, but the PCC and the leadership as well. And part of that is actually having the resources to be able to share with them that you can then use as a church. So as part of our campaign, we drew on the diocesan templates that the Generous Giving Advisor brought our way. They were really helpful. We just made a few tweaks and were able to then share that with the congregation as part of our campaign. But also about using videos such as this one for our PCC, for our wardens, for those in leadership, so that they catch the vision as well and understand just how important this is and how central this is to our life as a church.
I sort of inherited a model where preaching on giving is like an annual event in the church calendar. It really struck me, perhaps for the first time or afresh from Andrew speaking, that this is something we can feed in, drip in, Sunday by Sunday. Just make it something that's part of our, we talk about generosity, I think of genes, I think of it, our DNA. It's something that should be there the whole time, not make it a special thing. Because we've been a struggling parish over many years, I think about weaving some of this message in, as I say, on a more regular basis, Sunday by Sunday, rather than a sense of dread that the subject of money is going to come up again, or the next crisis is going to hit the church building, the fabric, and so on.
Firstly, I asked Andrew Smith from the diocese to come and preach on a Sunday morning, just to get the congregation collectively thinking about responding to God in a way that reflected all of his generosity through both time, talent, and yes, financially as well. That was a great success. It went down very, very well. And then I asked him to come back and talk to my PCC, so that my PCC were on the journey with us to try and get this embedded so that generosity became the second nature, and we never had to worry about not everything we were doing wasn't embedded in what God wanted us to do here and now.
In preparation for our Generosity Sunday, I wrote a letter to all of the congregation, telling the congregation clearly about our financial difficulties, that we were in this deficit, and that we were going to have a special service when we would pray about that. And people also had some information to take away with them about how they might respond. And it was something they could return to us with sort of a tick box things about, I would like to do this, or I would like to, offer this. And also it wasn't just about financial generosity, remembering that not everyone has a sort of more money that they can give. In fact, some of our congregation, this is going back just after COVID, some of our congregation might have to reduce their giving, and we need to acknowledge that and hold that with care.
We realised that we needed a programme to follow, something to tell us what to do and when. And we found the parish funding programme, and there are very similar resources available with generous giving. And it told us how to do a stewardship campaign, how to change our hearts about giving. And so we followed it step by step. It talked about setting up a small group. It talked about the culture of prayer in our small group, in our PCC, and in our congregation. And it talked about talking plainly to our congregation about what it costs to run a church, but also the fact that we don't pay to come to church. Everyone should be able to come to church, and giving is about what our expression of our faith. I suppose three things that really stood out were really thinking about prayer. So how not only the vicar and not only the congregation, but the PCC, the leadership of the church, how can we together be praying about our giving and about changing the culture of giving in our church. We also provided a way for people to respond. In fact, we provided a way for people of any ages to respond to our giving campaigns. We had pledge forms, and they could write or draw things that they wanted to pledge. And also, there were places to put how much I was going to increase my giving or start my giving with as well. So prayer and response. And also being clear and plain about what people want to know about giving. I was surprised as a vicar that my congregation were asking me, how much should I give? How do I get an idea of what percentage I should give? And so being really clear and plain about how much we expect, or whether that's a percentage or however it might be.
We are planning to hold a generous giving campaign which will cover 2 Sundays, one where we issue the challenge, the second Sunday where we invite people to bring their responses. We had hoped to do that in June, but we hadn't quite got the material into a shape that was ready, so that's been postponed. Will probably happen in the autumn this year, but we are still going to go ahead with that. In addition to that, what we've been doing is looking at other ways of enabling people to give. And again, working with Andrew, we've done things like we've installed a card machine, a giving station. We have a little sum-up machine in the church office that we can use when we're away from base. And certainly this Christmas, it was interesting, last Christmas, we got quite a lot of people using the giving machine, even though we put no publicity out there. It had just arrived. We didn't know how it worked. And we got several £100 through that machine just by being there with no publicity whatsoever.
And so as part of our sort of teaching programme, if you like, across the year, we have a programme card, and in the autumn, often between harvest and remembrance, we have 3 or 4 weeks relating to generous giving or the generosity of God or the joy of giving. We have like a sermon series, and that, as well as the teaching on a Sunday, it's also about how we can give of our money, but also give of ourselves, seeking to imitate something of the generosity of God.
I contacted Andrew, the generous giving advisor here, and we arranged a meeting with myself, him and my associate vicar, so we could just talk about the process, what we would do, how we would bring this to life and to be something to engage and connect with our different congregations across our sites.
So we wanted to do a 3-week campaign on stewardship and giving and generosity. We decided that we were going to do that in February, and so just after Christmas we started speaking about it to the congregation, saying that this was coming up. We wanted them to know that it was coming down the line and it wouldn't come as a surprise to them. And we divided up the material between those 3 Sundays. We spoke to the diocesan generous giving advisor and asked him to come and speak at our services. So one of those Sundays was given by our diocesan advisor, which was really helpful to get an outside voice and a different perspective for our congregation. So we divided up the material between the 3 Sundays. The first Sunday we gave some of the biblical background and overview of why generosity and giving is at the heart of our discipleship, and that giving is part of our relationship with Jesus. The second Sunday we looked at some of the facts and figures about where we are financially as a church. So we shared a PowerPoint with our outgoings and our income to give people an idea of where we are. But we also included a number of testimonies from people in the congregation. We wanted people to be inspired and encouraged by stories of how God has provided financially and how he's blessed people's giving. So a couple of Sundays before, we asked people in the congregation, would you be able to share a story? And we were really blessed by the people who came forward, shared different stories of how God had provided for them, or maybe through blessing someone else financially. Amazing things had come out of that. And so in each of the sites, we had 2 people sharing those stories on that Sunday, and that was a real encouragement for people to hear.
The message hasn't changed at all over the decades. It's an encouragement for Christian people to be generous, responding to the amazing sacrifice of the Lord Jesus for us. But of course, the mediums have been updated, and we do things differently. We now use video, we use our website, we use digital methods of giving, all ways to encourage people to give and make it easier for them to do so. As a church family, we recognise that different people are at different stages of their giving journey. Some people have been giving for years. They understand that it's very much a part of their discipleship. But some people are very new to church. They perhaps don't even understand the concept of why we give or where the money for the church comes from. A lot of people I meet think that we're funded by the government, and we gently have to say, no, we're funded by the members here. So it's an encouragement to them to give. So sometimes we talk about the different steps of giving, recognising that people are on different journeys in their own giving. And on our website, we've got a document called 6 Steps to Christian Giving. And that might begin by something like a subscription. A lot of people subscribe to different services, whether it's their Netflix or a subscription to a club. And there's just a small way of giving a little bit of money to say, I belong, I join, I appreciate what goes on here. But we recognise that actually Christian giving is more than that. We think of Christian giving in terms of sacrifice, as our campaign says. We want people to be sacrificial in their giving. And perhaps that's the last stage of Christian giving, a recognition that it's sacrificial. And the implication of that is it's costly. It might cost you something. And we might say to folk, well, if you're going to be sacrificial in your giving, what are you going to have to stop? What can't you do this year because you've been generous to the church family and God's kingdom here?
Inevitably, with a historic building, one reaches a crisis point. A few years ago, it was the roof on the south side. Now it's the roof on the north aisle. And these things do engage the community. We do find that community groups rally round. It catches their imagination. They feel, whether or not they're regular worshippers, a sense of connection to the parish church. And they do express that generosity in amazing ways, actually, that are great encouragement to me.
I'm hoping that it will make St Margaret's part, the central heart of this community. I'm hoping that people will see it as a space they can come to, both in our churchyard, which is beautiful, which we're trying to rewild and do things like that with. I'd like us to move to having a lovely parish room sort of space attached to the church. That's the big picture, is to get that up and running.
We decided we needed a vision for our giving. Our church vision is to love God and love Hove like Jesus and see our world transformed for the better. And we wanted to map that onto our giving. So we wanted to see if we could become a church that was 100% giving funded, so that our ministry could be funded by our giving, and whatever other resources we had could go into new and exciting things.
And so often I've found, or I say to people, just take stock of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and prioritising that, bearing in mind the resources that you have and doing fewer things better. but also seeing the partnership within the wider community, because the other benefit we have in villages is that a lot of people still see the church as theirs.
Giving is part of our discipleship life. We have a generous, extravagant God who has given to us in so many ways, and we give back to him. So my main aim is for people to see giving and financial giving as part of their discipleship life, of their everyday following Jesus. Yes, of course, we have a goal of wanting to see people respond by regular giving to the ministry and mission of the church. And that was part of the pledge forms that we would have, and we've been encouraging people to respond by actually increasing their parish giving scheme or whatever it is that they're using. But also just to be aware of that generosity of how we give and the impact it makes on the mission we do here in Lewes for kingdom work.
We had an increase in our standing orders of 25%. So that was a really good result. Plus we had 5 very significant donations made to the church, one of which was sufficient to cover the repair works that we need to do on the church this year.
So it was a really good campaign. We decided to do it over 3 years, and we had a giving focus every October for a month over 3 years. And the first year was amazing. I think it was a breath of fresh air to talk clearly and plainly and unashamedly about giving. The congregation really responded, and we had set pledges that we wanted people to meet if they could, and there was something that everyone could join in with in some way. And God blessed it, and in that first year, our giving went up by £1,000 a month. Now, it was a wonderful thing to see, because people were giving because they were responding to what God was doing in their hearts.
So for the third Sunday, we wanted to encourage people to respond to what they had heard. We had a pledge form that we gave out to people in the services, inviting them to make a response. Collected those up at the end of the service in the next couple of weeks. We were really encouraged that of those people responding, 80% of them were going to do something positive by way of response. And so over the next few weeks, we still encourage people to respond, for those maybe who haven't been at that final service, and made sure to thank people for what they had done in response. We thought that was really important to acknowledge the changes that people had made in their giving.
The next plan is on our Patronal Festival is to launch a Responding to God's Generosity leaflet, which just asks people to pray about where they are and where they could go with us, and sort of embed this culture of giving generously.
We're balancing our books again. It's not something that we can be complacent about. So we continue to work with our stewardship officer, Dave, and are mindful of our need to continue the momentum that we began. And it's also important to remember the thank yous as well. So when we had the generosity Sunday service, we also followed it up a few weeks later with a very significant time to be able to say thank you, and letters went out of thank you letters as well. So that again will be part of what we plan for a Generosity Sunday with a time of thanksgiving afterwards.
We're just at the sort of beginning of is what we call the transformation project. It's another word for reordering. But one of the things we really want to do is make our church building more accessible to the community in which we live. At the moment, we're unable to leave the church open unattended because we have no secure areas. Our vestry is partitioned by curtains. So the first phase of our transformation, which we hope to start sometime in the next year or so, will involve boxing in the vestry, making it secure so we can leave the church open, sorting out the main entrance people come in through, putting a couple of toilets in, and just making the place more welcoming and more more available to the community. I would love to see this to become a place where people feel they can come and pray whenever they want to. And certainly in parishes I've worked in the past, that's been a really powerful thing, just the witness of the building as a place where people come to pray. What we're trying to do is just reach out to the community and say, welcome, come in.
Giving is, as I've said, part of being a disciple of Christ, and we want to have that as part of our culture here at Trinity. So my plan at the moment is that every year we will talk about giving, generosity, and specifically financially. I think what my aim at the moment is that we've just done a 3-week campaign. Next year, we will have a Sunday that will remind and prompt and highlight finances again. And then the following year, we'll do another 3-week stewardship campaign. And I think we're probably looking at alternating it that way. But the church know this is part of who we are, what we do, and part of our regular culture of being church and being disciples of Christ.
So here at Linfield, we've got a huge legacy. And by that, I don't mean a big pot of money that we can use. I don't mean that someone's left us loads of money. What I mean is that we've been left a legacy of Christian teaching and discipleship, a commitment to proclaiming the gospel, and as part of that, a recognition that we give. We give in response to all the Lord Jesus has done for us. I'm talking about this. I'm talking about 50, 60 years of teaching on Christian giving, and we are so thankful for those before us who began that journey, and we now continue.